Right, guys, well, I'm back today taking a look at the Trek 22 bullpup stock for Ruger 10/22 rifles, and these are made by Desert Tech. Now, I was very interested when I saw these pop up online. I kind of forgot about them, honestly. Then I saw them pop up again on a few different places that I generally look at, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to grab one. So I actually grabbed one of these, and before I did, I reached out to Desert Tech for potentially getting one to review. They said yes, and then we kind of stopped talking, so never heard back. Maybe I'll get one of their rifles to review. We'll see in the future, but this one was purchased by myself for the channel, so no true affiliation with Desert Tech. Let's talk about this, why you may want it, the installation process, although I can't show that on YouTube because of their policies, and then we'll talk about its performance down at the range. Now, before we do, I want to give a huge shout out to Target Sports USA and their Ammo Plus membership for providing the ammo to help make this video. Now, I sign up for their Ammo Plus membership every single year. There's a lot of savings when it comes to that. And again, a huge shout out. I get all of my 22 exclusively from Target Sports USA. Now let's talk about it. Now, a bullpup is a different style of rifle than a traditional rifle because it moves the action behind the trigger, and that's generally not the case. What this allows for is a shorter overall package while still retaining a 16-inch barrel, making this a full rifle length without any special paperwork. Now, this stock drops right into a lot of these standard Ruger 10/22s. Now, for me, I would go with some type of standard profile barrel because you don't want anything too large because it might interfere with the stock itself. I also wouldn't have any aftermarket accessories or components on your 10/22 because it could affect the fit from a lot of the reviews I read. I just grabbed a standard 10/22 off the shelf and it dropped in fairly smooth. Let's talk a little bit about that installation process and the instructions. Now, the instructions are incredibly detailed, color, and very well worded. Although they are very good, very detailed, it was a little bit of a chore to put this in. It took me about 10 tries to get everything lined up correctly. One issue is the nuts on the opposite side of where you put the screws in are not captured, so they simply fall out. So you couldn't just like line up the screws like this and drop the shell and then start tightening because the nuts on the other side have to be held into place. The other thing is there's a lot of different size screws, so each one has a corresponding location, so that kind of can be a little bit tedious. But more importantly, the trigger bar linkage inside has to be lined up, set there, and then you have to set the shell on top and capture some of the trigger pins without them falling, and then kind of hold it together while you put the screws in. The process is very straightforward, if that makes sense. It's not complicated. It doesn't require any special tools or knowledge. It's just a little bit tedious. But with that being said, once it was together, it went together pretty nice. Although, one thing to note, the barrel itself, when you are clamshelling this in, is only supported by the receiver, and the receiver is clamped between two shells, and then it has some alignment pins that go through the receiver. I noticed when you start putting in these pins and screws in different orders, it actually shifts the barrel left or right depending on what you're tightening first. So I would recommend, and I didn't really see this in the instruction manual, I may have glossed over, inserting the receiver pins in first and getting those incredibly tight, checking to see how true the barrel looks to the seam or the pick rail at the top, and then tightening everything around it. And that'll get the barrel as true as possible because the receiver and barrel are attached via the clamshell. But again, your pick rail for your optics mounting is in no way, shape, or form tied to the receiver in a fixed mechanical way. It is only tied to the clamshell itself. So therefore, if the barrel shifts inside the clamshell, your optic is not adjusting. So this is not going to be like a precision setup by any means. Most likely you will lose some type of accuracy when putting it in the clamshell just due to the nature of a polymer shell that can actually flex with different seams, as you can see here. and not being directly mounted to the receiver itself. Just is what it is. Now, with that being said, we will talk about the accuracy a portion in the later part of this review, and it was still fairly accurate. Don't get me wrong, it was pretty darn accurate and it worked out well, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's start off by talking about the material selection, and the polymer itself seems fairly durable. It's got a nice feel to it, a nice texture to it, and everything did install as it should. No real major issues. It's got the M-LOK slots on the bottom and at the top, and you do have a seam running through your bottom M-LOK slots. Now, they have very specific torque specs that they recommend that you don't crank down on this plastic, just so you don't crack anything. I didn't worry about it too much. I just kind of snugged everything up, and it seems to be doing well. The M-LOK slots work out great, and the pick rail at the top is pretty nice. I actually have this Votatu light on the top, and it works out pretty darn good. Moving back to the trigger itself, it's actually a pretty darn good trigger linkage system. I love the design of it. It works out well. It's very straightforward, and the trigger isn't half bad. The trigger guard is pretty nice. It can accommodate a gloved finger, and it's a fairly ergonomic grip with really nice texturing, and then it's also kind of tapered down right here to wrap your thumb around the top of this, so it's a very ergonomic good grip, and the pick rail stays out of the way of your thumb. Moving back, what I love about this setup is that it retains a lot of basic features from the receiver itself, like the mag lever release. It also has that bolt lock open and the standard safety, as well as access to the side. On top of that, you can see the model number and serial number of your Ruger, and it's cut out right there, so you don't have to hide that. And then it actually has two compartments for two of the standard 10-round mags on the back, and some texturing located on the rear, as well as a metal QD slot that kind of slides in there. So love the fact that it incorporates a lot of the standard features of the Ruger 1022 and still gives you access to them. The minimalist design is great, and that's why I picked something like this up. It really shortens the overall package pretty dramatically, and it gives you a lot of maneuverability when you're holding this 22. So if you wanted to get a little varmint getter for like 50 yards in or up close for something like a side-by-side or like a little hunting rig, or throwing some type of night vision devices on here, IRs and things like that, like this is a pretty slick setup. If you're running a can on the end of it, it shortens up the package, especially with one of those micro cans, and gives you a really quiet plinker. I love the idea and concept of the Trek 22. Some of the improvements that I would suggest to be made could be potentially a little bit more ease of installation, and one thing would be just captured nuts on the other side. I don't know how that would be possible. It'd probably take a little bit more effort on their part, but captured nuts on the other side would make life a lot simpler for installation. And just installation in general on something like this is always going to be a little bit nuanced. But overall, it worked out pretty good. The main thing, though, would be kind of like that accuracy. You may see the seam right here at the top. If I tighten this screw, it puts more pressure on the front of the receiver. Something with the polymer isn't true, and as I tighten the screw, you can see the barrel pull to one side. So I had to leave that sort of loose because the barrel will start pulling over and shifting inside the chassis system, making it impossible to sight in with this dot. So I had to leave this particular screw loose to make sure that the barrel was true inside the stock kit. With that being said, I still had to throw this optic almost all the way to one side to get everything sighted in, but when I finally got it sighted in, I was taking shots at 50 yards and stacking dimes. It was great. I didn't see a shift in zero or a loss in zero, but just know I had to shift it like all the way over just because of the way this was designed. If somehow they could figure out a little bit more rigid approach to the Picatinny rail versus the receiver, that would be good, but overall it's actually not that bad. It would almost be nice to see some type of adjustment screws on the receiver itself to make sure everything was true with the pick rail, but it worked out pretty good. I did get everything sighted in, so no major complaints. I love it. I love a lot about it. And those little complaints about it are just something that you have to know when you're getting into it. I am a big fan of this setup. I'm really glad I grabbed one, and I'm hoping to review their complete rifle soon. I'll kind of keep you updated on its performance, and I'll let you guys know if Desert Tech ends up sending out a rifle for us to try, but definitely love this setup. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.